stories and journeys.
Hope you don't mind. Is that all right, Anthony, that we record?
I'm ecstatic to be recorded. So thank you so much, and thank you everybody. I'd just like to start by saying there is absolutely no academic background to what I'm actually doing. I was exceptionally lucky at the age of 17. My housemaster took me aside and he said, "Anthony, this is the time now to talk about your future." So I thought this is going to be quite interesting what he said. But then his opening line was, "Let's get one thing quite clear. You are far, far, far too stupid to go to university." And I remember at that moment thinking, wow, freedom, away from all of this academic meaningless that I really couldn't understand. And I got an exchange to go on a high school exchange to America, and it just changed my life. Last week, I was staying with people who I'd been at school with 55 years ago, or 50-something years ago. So there's not academic background, so I hope you'll enjoy some of the images, including me hitchhiking across from Perth to Sydney. But what I'm trying to do, I mean, I'm 72, 73 in a month's time, is really to try to make out how can one make one's life relevant? And what is it that one can actually make it relevant? So it's not just a series of images or a series of words, but it actually works with people. So I hope you don't mind if I can start. Shall I show a few slides then? Would that be all right? Thank you. And thank you all very, very much for your time. I've spent some magnificent time in Australia over the many, many, many decades. But if I can just show you sort of the background. You can see the horses.
Yep.
So these, I say, are all my own photographs. But this is taken about 3 years ago. I nearly got killed just before COVID because I'm lying there taking that photograph. And just what do I do? Well, what I've sort of worked out is a way of how do we use the power of natural metaphors and ancient wisdom to transform client relationships. Now, that obviously sounds commercial, but in a way it is, because what I've been looking at is how do we actually talk to each other? What is universal? And through this mapping, what we do is we ask people to focus. What are they hunting? What are they protecting? And whether we're on the Great Wall of China at my training center with the Omnicom executives, or we're in London with IBM, we simplify things down. So we invite the Maasai in to teach. They teach about leadership, identity, purpose. We work with Aboriginals as well in Australia to really talk about what is it. We provide this frame of reference for people to talk about. And just to show that this is some of the different countries and places that these ideas have evolved from Africa and Asia and Australia. And I think we're really always on a migration in our lives, moving from one place to another. And I've joined 3 different migrations in Mongolia, moving from the winter to spring pastures. And, that photograph could be 100 years old. It's been going on for thousands of years, as we migrate from those different places. And what I've done is to work with Indigenous people and others and try to simplify things down to really a very, very simple set of questions, which is, people talk about purpose, but it's what are you actually hunting? Is it reputation? Is it identity? What do you really want people to say about you? Surely that is what we're hunting, a person of absolute integrity, of vision. And if that's what you want to do, then what do you have to protect? And what do you have to grow in your heart, in your community, so that you know what you're hunting, protecting, and growing? And then who sits around their fire? And I ask this in homeless centers, at schools, why I'm in Scotland at the moment, and elsewhere. So there I am as a small boy. I'm 8th generation expatriate. I have very little affiliation with the United Kingdom. There I am at school going, what is this all about? So I got so bored that I actually decided to become a bullfighter. So I went and spent a summer in Spain, sort of going to a couple of estancias. But trust me, the bull wasn't hurt. But anyway, now there I am as a grandfather. my two boys, my son-in-law, my daughter, my wife, Victoria, who still puts up with me, and our 3 grandchildren. And it's really trying to sort of think about what is that journey we're on. And exactly 50 years ago, or virtually to the day, I caught the Trans-Siberian Express to Japan. So I know what it's like to be a migrant. I arrived in Yokohama by boat, and I know that feeling of knowing nobody and starting. And I lived in Japan for about 30 years. The first job I had was managing the world skipping rope champion. We set up a sales promotion company. We went around Switzerland promoting this is the Weile Gumperin, this Sola Cote, and all sorts of other things. So that was really what I was doing for my life. But if I can be honest, during the 70s, I was in search of a bigger Rolex than my father. That's sort of the honesty thing it was. And, you know, by the end of the 70s, I did actually have this very nasty gold Rolex that my wife has never let me wear. But it sort of made me think that, wow, that's what I want. And then I was going out with a girl in Tokyo called Sue, who was absolutely fabulous. And I sort of thought, well, I was devastatingly attractive in those days. So all I need to do is to go to Singapore and everybody will find me amazing. And they didn't. So I had my Rolex, and I've never been more miserable in my life. And I was trying to work out why one day do we want something and the next day we really don't. So I decided to come up with a peace of mind chart. So, you know, life is strange. And I wrote down missing Sue, desire to fly to Tokyo on a scale of 1 to 10. And I plotted it over about 3 months. And what I discovered was if I played a good game of rugby or went skydiving, my desire to marry Sue dropped. So I sort of became fascinated and started to work out that really our needs and our wants, we need something, we want something, are actually linked to our belonging and our recognition. And that is actually linked to our trust in ourselves and others. And I sort of realized that if I focused on trust, it actually helped my belonging and my recognition and my needs. So there I am in Seduna, hitchhiking across from Perth to Sydney with a sign, tourist pommy bastard needs ride. I got across in 72 hours on the road. It was pretty good. It was just after the Nullarbor had been rode. But I sort of saw that it was really giving me a sense of trust and identity. But I realized there's got to be more to life than what we're taught in school and elsewhere. And it was really on a camel safari in northern Kenya back in 1982. And each evening, the Maasai would come into our little community. And I'm sure you've seen the Maasai, some of you have. And what I saw for the first time in my life were people who had absolute substance without arrogance. And I realized that my entire education and most Western education is massive arrogance with zero substance. And the other thing my school taught was effortless insincerity. And I sort of became fascinated. What is it that we need in our hearts to feel fulfilled? And is it something that we've sort of forgotten? So I met Joseph Nombre in Tokyo. He's the Papua New Guinea ambassador who remembers first contact. And I said, sir, what have you got that we've lost? He said, you know, I really don't know, but why don't you go to my village? So there I am in the highlands of Papua New Guinea back in 1981 or 2. And it was there that I started to ask them about, so what, a big man, you know, what is it? Why do you have feathers? It's because you can hand out feathers. Leadership is about handing out your feathers. And I started to hear the link between feathers, spears, and shields. And what I learned is that a big man has many feathers, or woman, but they can hand them out. The bigger man hands them out. It inspires people. And your spear, you can't buy it, you can't sell it, you're not entitled to it. You have to earn it and be responsible for it. And you probably never thought about feathers or spears, but I think I could probably ask you, do you know people who hand out their feathers? You know people, and you know others who hoard them, right? And you know people who, who've got a plastic spear. Oh, I'm a member of this organization, I'm that, I've got a Ferrari. But actually they've got nothing in their hearts. And it started to make me sort of curious as to what really is leadership. And how do you earn your seat at the table? And I remember being round the fire with the Maasai here, and I just said, so who is the leader in your group? And they sort of looked at me quizzitively and said, what is the problem you're trying to solve? We are all leaders. Tell us your problem and we will tell you the solution or the most appropriate person. And when I got back to Tokyo, I asked the ambassador, I just sort of had all sorts of conversations. Then I came up with a question that I was fascinated by the answer. I said, sir, what is the most important thing in your life? And he just looked at me straight in the eye and he said, it is my territory. From the age of 3, I'm taught to do it. So these are his words. So he knew his territory. Therefore, he knew his duty, which was to protect and defend the territory and what the aims and ambitions were. So it made me think, for the first 99.9% of human existence, our identity has come from what are we protecting? What are we growing? And what is the essence of what we want to be recognized for? And I started to see the difference. But I also thought, what was my territory? A couple of bars in Tokyo where women were semi-friendly. So I started to go off, this is during the 80s, on a series of journeys wandering into the Taklamakan Desert. And there was the camel train I organized, the Desert of Death in Western China. And then I also decided to walk across Papua New Guinea. And on this trip, we had no food because I thought there would be villages. So the only thing we had with us was 24 bottles of wine. And this fellow you can see there, he did one thing that destroyed the morale. He complained every step of the way. And I saw how complainers completely destroy morale. So I was then invited to climb a 7,000-meter mountain. And I just said, right, anybody who joins me on any journey has got to sign the I will not complain declaration. I will not complain if I get eaten or trodden on if ex-reporter employed to carry wine. I realize I can be sent home. Because when you look at our goals in life, we all struggle with them. That's just 7,500 meters. That's where it is on Everest. It's reasonably high. We're going to climb it without porters and oxygen. But what I sort of started to realize is you can look at these mountains. That's part of our training program, looking at Mount Kenya. But as you actually get onto the mountain of life, it's really tough. And you can't complain. And you've got to know why you're doing things. And it's just the same when I'm joining the migrations in Western Mongolia. This is 5 days in -30, moving about 500 head of cattle through the Altai Mountains. You know, you need to be armed. You need the attitude. So it's really, what do we really need in life? But what I saw in everything I was doing was it was about teamwork. And that is what we needed. So I opened the very first outdoor team building center in Japan with a very, very simple tarpaulin, and I will unlock trust and willpower. And I was then met up with the chap from China, and he said, look, you've got to open a training center on the Great Wall of China. So this is at Jinshanling back in 1992. So I found this derelict center. This is what it looked like. You see that little tree there. And I thought, wouldn't it be brilliant to bring people together, to share food, to break bread? And you can see that tree, how it's grown. And for 20 years, we would bring people there. We even did team building for Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and their families and some of the business people back in 95. And what I started to see was what people really wanted to do was to have an experience and to talk to each other. But what I realized is they needed context. So I started to use the Great Wall as a metaphor. This happens to be Nike. And I said, so how do you see your world? Are you attacking it? Are you defending it? What is going on in your territory? And they could instantly draw what they needed to do. So I started to see that businesses, what people needed was clarity. And it was about that time I was working with Thomson and Reuters. They were separately before they merged. And Dan Vedetto, who ran Thomson Financial in Tokyo, he said, we got two teams coming together. They don't know each other. So we don't want a team building. We just want them to be able to have context talk. So I said, well, look, can I try something? I said, look, this is a map. drawn by Casper Ban and the Sepik River, the biggest river in Papua New Guinea. And he knew, and he said, look, this man knows what he's hunting, protecting, and growing. And, you know, he knows it from the heart, from the age of 3. Can I give the employees of Thomson and Reuters a blank sheet of paper and say, what are you hunting, protecting, and growing? And what I found fascinating was instantly they could draw the big clients, they could draw their village and the bridges and where they were growing. And once they could do that, they could then work out what were the different roads to build. So I became fascinated that this I saw was really the future. But this is, the mapping is not an art. So I thought, well, I know what they do in Papua New Guinea. What would they draw in Africa? So the top left are some photographs from the 1980s. When I went looking for these people, we got massively lost. But I found the old woman, the little girl in the photograph. She's now got a baby on her back. And I said, you know, what is your territory? How do you see your life as a Maasai, as a nomad? And this is one of the maps drawn by John Lekimencho. And what he says, we're hunting green pastures, we're protecting our community, and we're growing our wealth, our knowledge, the power, the wisdom of our employees or of our tribal people. So I started to see hunt, protect, and grow, and I've continued to do this. This is when my son was about 8, he's now 28, sitting down in Africa, using this as a way of creating a communicative language. When I saw whether I was in Mongolia with the eagle hunters or the reindeer herders, they knew what they were doing. And then reindeer herders, you can see their boots turn up because they don't want to damage the land, because they are custodians of the land and they're looking after the health, the wellness of their reindeer. It's all they have. And then in Kenya, it's holding on to the custom. You know, what is it that they're growing? So it's really what I've seen is how do we migrate through the different seasons of our life with a core set of values? These are different seasons in Mongolia. But ultimately, how do we build a community that we can be really, really proud of? You know, what gives us that sense of why would people come to us? Why would they be attracted? Why would they want to sit around our fire? And that's what I've now done is I've simplified life, business, everything in life down to a set of core icons of asking people, what is that quest that they're on? What are they protecting? Their shield, they're growing. Who's around their fire? And then those rivers, those mountains and the swamps and the territory. And what feathers do you have to hand out and the resources? And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. I've been asking executives, I've been asking school children. I'm just up in Glasgow, I'm going to be at Glasgow Academy today, to ask students, what does it mean to have a well-lived life? You know, what do you really want to be proud of in your life? Not become a doctor or a train driver. What is in your heart that you want to actually achieve? And where I'm also proud is working in a homeless center in Wrexham. And this lady here, she's had all sorts of challenges. But when you ask her to draw a map and explain how she saw things, that is what she could do. And once people can have a map, then they can explain to others, well, this is what I can do. This is how I can help you. And that's, as I say, it crosses all cultures. In Japan, you know, people can work together with a universal language because for millions of years we have hunted, we've protected, and we've grown. And whether we're working with Google, it lets women talk more than they normally would do in a Japanese meeting. In Africa, it doesn't get people onto spreadsheets. It gets them to talk about the essence of trust and bridge building and bringing out their community identity for it. The trouble with mapping in the world is that, you know, the chairman says we're heading for paradise. What do the employees see? Bullshit bridge, fantasy applications. That's most organizations. The bottom left is Ferrari. How do we protect our customers from all these other there? And the central bank of Indonesia is on a journey to be credible. So what the maps do is they let people, as I say, in the homeless center, at schools and elsewhere, and you can't see the difference between those that are drawn in a homeless center and by billionaires, where I've just been working with in America. It lets everybody talk about, what do we need to trust? Where are we? What is it? Who am I? What am I trying to achieve? So for any executive, or if you're coaching someone, once you've got a map of your client's territory, and ultimately, how can you help anybody if they don't know what they're hunting, protecting, and growing? Because otherwise they're just using words without context. So what we do is we take people on a journey. And on that journey, you co-create your own map to navigate your new realities. You create clear, bold action plans to create, prosperity and hope. And you give people a language, that ancient language of trust, clarity, and moving forwards. So it is about finding people who want to cross a bridge. A lot of people don't. These for reassurance of some of the companies that I've worked with using this methodology. And it is embedded in indigenous communities. I'm not taking cultural appropriation. I've been accused of that. But ultimately, a tree knows what it's hunting. It's hunting sunlight. It's growing its roots. It's protecting its bark. And then this is when we take people to Africa to spend time with the Masa. And these are some recent photographs at the EMCC, European Mentoring and Coaching Council. And we gave everybody a map. And we said, what is it that you want to achieve in your life? Where are you? Who's around your fire? And we just created these simple ways, simple tools. And this is a school in Ipswich in England. And the girl on the left, when she presented her map, which has got massive vision and hope, and interestingly enough, no map had any social media on it, which I find fascinating. But the school teacher said, how can the school help you fulfill your bold vision? She looked at the teacher and said, I really don't know. And the teacher said, wow, well, we better work out how we're going to help you. Because I think the future of education is about having that sense of identity. This is I've just been in Denver a couple of weeks ago, and this is with people who work with billionaires and also billionaire ultra high net worth families. And we had a Maasai live from his village, from his hut, talking to these people about what does it mean to have a life? What does it mean to have pride? And how can we accept that in our own lives? Because everybody's got a map. Everybody can explain this is where we want to go. So where my own map is, if I might show you, years ago, I thought, all I need, if I set up trust and willpower and, expertise, I will make a fortune. But I discovered that trust and willpower was way over on the right-hand side. And it was still in the old world of corporate, of arrogance, structure, stability, security, certainty, and all of those delusions that civilization makes us believe. So what I did is I sort of camped and said, is there a new sort of wealth? And that's where I've been camping. And I believe that once we know what we're hunting, protecting, and growing, who sits around our fire, we then have clarity, purpose, and identity. And we can't have that if we don't know what we're hunting, protecting, and growing. So what we're doing, and this is why I'm really excited talking to you, is we're working with people who are coaches, courageous leaders, education, and we're partnering with people. And we're starting to say, look, do you think your clients would be more successful if people did have clarity, they did have purpose, and they did have identity? And then we can build that road across to them. So it's a way of, obviously, you've got to call it direction and focus, growth and development. You've got to use those words. But ultimately, it is tapping into people's hearts that we've always had rivers to cross, swamps to get out of. And then my vision is really that, we'll put a map of clarity, purpose, and identity in every hand, and an I will not complain philosophy, in every mind. And This has been our program in America around full-hearted prosperity. And that's really define and explore what is real wealth? What is our purpose? What is our map? And then you can start to go into, so let's release the old. Let's celebrate what was. And let's recognize the courage we need to move forward. And then we can start to go, wow, let's embody that new. When we've got that clarity, we've got that direction, we're working with clients, we know their maps, we know their territory. We're talking to their hearts and their identity. And that's what I've been doing for the last sort of 50 years. So thank you all very much for listening. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope we can find ways to work together. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Pleasure, 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 Mr. Willoughby. All right. There is, so Anthony, I had the privilege last Thursday night of being introduced to a gentleman in Sydney by the name of John Burgess, and Anthony Harrison did the introduction. And I went to John Burgess at the end of that, and I said, John, listening to you was like tuning into a black hole. The information that you shared was dense. It was all-encompassing. It gravitated the room to you, John. And I've had that privilege all again within a week, Mr. Willoughby. You are a black hole of, and black holes are not emptiness. Black holes are this dense, attractive, all-encompassing space that are so important to how this universe works. So, Anthony, thank you for sharing. Now, I reckon there might be a few comments or thoughts from peeps that are in our room tonight, because it's a damn privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
Go, Deb.
Yes, I would agree. Greg, last week was amazing, and thank you, Anthony. Really, really love what you're about. Interested to hear when you say you partner with coaches and things like that. In what way? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, we're putting together a training program, in fact, so we can train coaches, because, you know, I'm sure most of you run all these different workshops, and it is so depressing when you run a brilliant workshop, everybody's excited, and nothing else ever happens. So what I would say is, what I'm reasonably good at is creating insights, clarity, and context. But what I do not do well is the activation and the guidance on what to do next. So what we want to do is to work with coaches, consultants, and other people who've got the relationship. We're going to train people up. We're just setting up the program at the moment. So I can impart everything I've done on the mapping and also working on coaching. And then people can start using this to have that relationship with their clients on a new basis. So I hope to have something shortly that I can share with you. But it's how do we make, you know, I mean, I've been incredibly lucky and privileged on my journeys, but actually everybody's journey is relevant. I mean, we're working with someone who lived on the streets for 5 years. I mean, he's got a story that is far richer than mine will ever be in 100 generations, because he knows what life is about. And he wants to then advise people, how do you get out of the swamps of life? How do you get beyond destitution? Because he can then actually talk about the wealth in his heart. And I think that's what we want to do, is we want to make everybody's story relevant. So we train people up to do their own maps, to do their own, what are they hunting, protecting, and growing physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And then they can start to share that honesty with their customers, their clients, their friends, their family. And then you can start to have a sort of a proper conversation around that. So it is genuine partnering. I mean, we want people to embed their own stories into it, but show this is a way of creating some communication. So I hope that answered your question to some extent, Kate.
Oh, it was me, but I would love to hear more, but I will let other people do the questions.
Okay, sorry about that.
Reach
Sorry,
out-
Kate.
reach
Okay,
out
sorry,
to you.
sorry.
I'll reach out to
Yeah.
you.
Sorry, Deb. Sorry about that. I should have done that. Sorry,
That's all
Deb.
right. We got a black book for guys like you, Anthony. No worries. There's a mark against your black book. You got Deb's name wrong. Oh, there you go. Well, just join the list. That's all right, Anthony.
Yeah.
All right, Deb.
Yeah, Anthony, I just wanted to say thank you so much. It was quite thought-provoking in the way of us looking at our own foundations of our own life, for me anyway, as well as my business. And the hunting, protecting, growing is absolutely fantastic. So thank you. I've always been a mind map person, and you take it to a whole new level, and you really make the thought process come from brain to paper, which I think is amazing, and look at the different ways of perceiving it and looking at it through, you know, kinesthetic and different ways of looking at it that way. And I have to say that you've told a very important story through your amazing, wonderful photos. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Debbie. I mean, I did meet Tony Buzan on a couple of occasions. And what I really felt was that his mind maps could add massively to the territory map. Because once you realize you want to cross that bridge, well, what's the most appropriate mind map for it? But unfortunately, that never quite happened. But that's sort of how I see it. So it supports, it sits next to all sorts of other great initiatives that people have got. And that's how I want to take it forward. But thank you for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ian?
Yeah, I'm not Kate. I wish I was, but I'm not. One of the things that, well, mainly
I'm
because
glad
she's
you're
about
not
60
too.
years younger than me. One of the things that resonated with me, Anthony, is I grew up in the school environment where we treated many of the peoples that you spend time with as primitive cultures. There's this arrogance around how advanced we were and how smart we were. And I guess as I've dabbled and seen more of some of the social issues around poor mental health and other things, and materialism and greed, a whole bunch of stuff, I think we've got so much we can learn from these other cultures. And it was great to see that wisdom. I don't know how that arrogance, I suspect, is still very much out there. And I wonder how some of the corporate high flyers would respond to, we're going to bring someone in who's uneducated incredibly well educated, but not educated along the lines of what they think education is. And I wonder how they respond. Clearly they do.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, for education, this is total heresy to many people, and to corporates, it's completely mad. What could someone know about, you know, this? But you know, if you think how they've lived their life and their ability to be resilient and make decisions and have clarity, you have to work with the chief on this sort of a program. There is absolutely no way you can work with some junior manager unless for personal growth and development. But it has to be a chief who's going to go, yep, we've got to achieve this. How do we bring our team together? How do we say, in this room, we have 300 years of wisdom in this industry. We've got to solve these problems. We've got to get everybody on the same map. And it's in a way, it's frightening for the leader, because once you ask them, you know, once people are asked to draw their maps, they've lost control, because it's people then talking about what's important to them. And the leaders often are not on people's maps. They're not there, you know. So it requires a sense of vulnerability on people to be able to draw it, because people haven't really learned how to cheat at maps. So you really get to some honesty. And as someone once said, you can't draw details, so, you know, or what's not important. So it gets to the essence of the nubs of the people to try to work out what they should be doing.
And that reminds me, I laughed when you said something there, Anthony. You know, running an expedition, and you know, kids would turn up at our place, and there were only composting toilets, or on an expedition, a hole in the ground. And on day one, a composting toilet was something to turn your nose up at and complain about, and how disgusting, and this is terrible. But 10 days later, when we've pooped in a hole for 10 days, then the composting toilet is phenomenal. it's an absolute damn luxury to come back to that. And so that whole experience of us as human beings and the context that we play in and how that impacts our perspective, it's phenomenal. You can't not go to the toilet for 10 days. So ultimately, your humanity drives, how you show up. The Turners.
Had to find the unmute button. That was absolutely fascinating. It already has me thinking of trying to answer those questions and makes me wonder if I can. I wanted to ask about, the timeframes of the individuals drawing the maps and when you're working with large groups. Does everyone seem to pick it up at the same time and move through it, or is there a large disparity of how long each individual as a part of the team takes, and how do you get them to connect and develop the map at the same pace?
Amazingly enough, people normally take about half an hour to 3/4 of an hour to actually sort of draw a map. And I've always thought people are just going to go, no, I can't draw a map. I'm not going to draw a map. But it just seems to be so deep inside everybody, this knowledge that we have of where we are hunting, protecting, and growing, that naturally people seem to be able to draw. Within a corporate, obviously, it's very different. If you're doing with a team mapping session, you've got to have a lot more background as to what they actually want to achieve, because the questions have got to be relevant. But within a day, you can really start to get people coming up with their individual maps. What are the key issues, opportunities, and barriers? Start to create commonality of those. Then you can start bringing it together as one map. You don't want to force people, let's get everybody on one map. You just let people talk and discuss. So it's really a discussion tool. And then the next day, the first afternoon, they'll go, John, your map absolutely represents it, but we'd better bring in a bit of Jones and Jane's, and then we can turn that into more of a map, and then what we can do with it. But occasionally people have taken it, they've put it up on the wall. Everybody can explain what the company does, from the receptionist to the managing director or to the clients. So just so many different ways of doing it. But it's easier than it looks, but it's just getting the first part of it. So because there's always this wobble when you say, hey, draw a map, because people go, what? And it just takes a bit of time to get used to that.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Anthony. All right, so here's what I'd like to have happen, because I've got my eye on the clock and we've got about, 10 minutes to go.
Yeah, I better let you go.
No, don't go anywhere, Anthony. No, I'm going to say on behalf of the group, this is fascinating. So please don't go anywhere. So John, then Steph, and then Tom, can I put it on you? Because you've said something personally to me in the chat, and I've got a sense of where you are at and where you're coming from. So I'd just love you to, connect in with the conversation a bit too. John.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And Anthony, thank you so much. It's great to hear your story again. And I just love the principles that you're espousing here. I think it's fantastic. I've got one question. I'd love to get your wisdom and your input on this. One of the things that I found I've encountered in working with organizations, not-for-profits and commercial organizations, but interestingly not-for-profits, is this concept that's around and has been for some time, that we've got to grow. If we're not growing, we're going backwards and we're going out the door. And what organizations take that as meaning is that we've got to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And therefore, what that means to them is I've got to take over other people's territories, and I've got to dominate, and I've got to be bigger than everyone else. And yet that often flies in the face of the purpose of what you're trying to do, particularly in a not-for-profit space. So could you talk to that a little bit? Did you understand what I'm talking about? I hope so.
I think I do. I mean, I think the challenge for not-for-profit is they have no idea who the customer is. Is it the donor, or is it the person that they serve? So, and what does the chief executive have to do, and what are the people on the ground trying to do? And this is what I've seen in different homeless centers, which is why it's great when the people who are actually part of the homeless center draw their maps, and then they can explain this is how they can be helped, or it works within the NHS, because it's sort of creating a level playing field as to what people are trying to to achieve. So, and you know, this whole idea, yes, we've got to grow, but you know, if we grow with our identity, with our purpose, with our values, with, you know, we will grow naturally. It's not around conquest, it's around evolution. And what are we then protecting? Does everybody know what we are protecting and growing? I mean, you know, you ask a 3-year-old Maasai boy, they'll tell you exactly they're protecting their goats. And, you know, they've got absolute authority, responsibility, and accountability. And that's what we're trying to sort of train people through this process we've now created, which is, you know, what are you hunting, protecting, and growing? Is it spiritual, physical, or emotional?
Yeah.
You know, what is it? Does that give you a sense of clarity, purpose, or identity when you know that? And then what do you have to be responsible for? Where do you need to be brave? And so it's just trying to tap into the natural human that we would all have known. And that's where our identity would have come from.
Yeah.
And then apply it. Yeah. You know, apply it anyway.
John,
thank you.
So, John, I think there's a way longer conversation with Anthony
Please.
at some point, but for the
We
sake
won't
of
go
tonight, no, let's move on. Steph.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you so much. That was super fascinating, as Greg said, and you certainly took me back to some of my time spent in Africa, which was pretty amazing. And I like to I love the connection, because I actually use that in my programs already, the connection between what I perceive as real flourishing in those communities in Africa with and how they can teach us lessons about those things as well. You know, just playing, you know, one whole village playing with one soccer ball, you know, and that whole Ubuntu thing. That's where Greg and I actually connected, was about Ubuntu. So I really just wanted to say thank you. I am definitely interested in speaking to you further, and because your philosophy is definitely very much in alignment with some of the things I already do. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. No, we'd love to build that partnership.
So before we go, Anthony, if you've got it at your fingertips, and if you don't, it's okay, but drop your contact details, your stuff into the chat. So that'd be good. Tom, I'm conscious that you've got the con in a moment. What I know is going to happen is that in exactly 6 minutes, a bunch of people are going to start dropping out and going and doing other things. So Tom, hold fire for a sec. So any of the new people that are here this evening, you are welcome. You included Anthony to attend the Smithsonian's any time that it suits you. We're on the same time, same Zoom link every Wednesday night at 5:30. We don't always have a guest speaker though. The intent of the Smithsonian's is to ask 4 key questions. What's working for you at the moment, and what are your wins? So in other words, let's celebrate together, because it's not all doom and gloom. There is awesome stuff happening in people's lives, in people's businesses, and in the process of building their networks or their tribes or their fire circle, in Anthony's mindset. The next question that we like to ask is, what do you need help with? So what's going on for you in life, business, work, building your network? What is it that you need help with? What's a barrier? And who is it that you need to meet, or what is it that you need to know? And when we have sessions without a guest speaker or any of us holding the con for a period of time, what tends to happen is that all sorts of support, ideas, brainstorming, I know this person who knows that person who knows that person, and we get a mushroom cloud of support and engagement and mutual advocacy and edification of each other. That's the purpose of the Smithsonian. So a little bit different tonight. So please keep coming back. Steph, you're welcome. Turners, you're new tonight. There was somebody else. Was there somebody else new tonight? Oh, Tom. So Tom, you're welcome anytime you like as well. So thanks, same bat time, same bat channel next week, and next week will be open forum. So we've got 4 or 5 minutes left. Tom, please share a thought.
Well, I guess first thing, thank you for the invite, Greg. Anthony, I wouldn't say I've done the same sort of travel, but I've done similar sort of travel over my shorter length of time on this universe. So I'm on the young side of 50. I think what I picked up in what you said was mapping combined with storytelling is an incredibly powerful thing to do, because essentially what happens is we can all read a map, everyone, and it's something you learn from when you are incredibly young, but actually understanding that you start building maps which describe the journey that you've taken through life, and recognizing that you can add to that map, either make it more complex or extend off the edges, I think is an incredibly powerful metaphor. And as I said, if I put my business hat on, i.e. Leaders in the Wild, this is something we've been attempting to do, is give people an insight into what local Indigenous knowledge might look like compared to settler knowledge, compared to extractive industries knowledge. And how do you then sit there and make sense of each of these things in a modern context? And I guess the last thing I wanted to say is this, is I think if you want to look at some really great ways of understanding this broader idea of mapping and narrative, you've only got to look at the example in Australia and the example in New Zealand as two nearest nations who couldn't be more different in how they actually understand their own history, both as Commonwealth countries, one with a treaty and one without. And Greg, I guess we don't have enough time, but I would love at some stage to unpack that, because I think we are probably less than 2 months away from a referendum decision in Australia. And the fact is, what we're being asked to do is grapple with what it means to actually tell our story honestly. And when you can travel to other parts of the world and tell your story honestly, it changes the sort of conversations that we have. And all of a sudden, what we're potentially able to do is map a different future.
Good. Keep coming along to the Smithsonian's, Tom.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll keep asking those sorts of questions.
I appreciate time, but Tom, I would love to talk more, because actually you can do the emotional maps, take people on a journey, and then you can see where they've got to. I work closely with Ben Southall, who won the best job in the world. He's up in Brisbane. He's a really close mate, so I'd love to introduce you.
Yeah, I had coffee with Ben a couple of weeks ago, Tom, so that's another intro to make too.
Well, I've written down email address and I'll flip your personal email, Anthony. So thank you.
And then maybe a final thing is you could use the swamps. How do we get out of our swamps? How do we cross our rivers? How do we chase our mammoths? And then you've got a common language for meetings to help people out of that swamp. But thank you very, very much indeed. I'm very conscious of your time. Much appreciated.
So, Anthony, before you go, please don't run straight away. How can this group of people who you don't know, but how could we help you achieve what it is, or engage with what it is that you are hunting, growing, and protecting? How can we support you?
That will become clearer within the next month or so. I'm chatting to quite a few people, and I'd love to talk to you, because how do we train people up, and how do we take them on a journey that they can then use it? And we're very, very nearly there. That's what I've been in America about last week. So we're very, very near having a methodology. And if you'd be interested in how we plan to train people, what we plan to do, and how we plan to build the community, I would absolutely love your input. And that would be within a month, Greg. So I will get back to you on that.
Okay.
But thank you,
Very
everybody. I'd love to work with you and build on the energy and the enthusiasm.
Awesome. All right, Anthony, thank you so much for your time, your morning, our evening. Anybody, I'll leave the room open if anybody wants to hang around and chat. Anthony, you can stay, or of course you're you're welcome to go and visit that school of yours today.
I just got to trot off and see the school, but I'd absolutely love to do more. And thank you very, very much. And great to feel I'm in Australia again. Cheers.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye for now.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers.
So, mate, if I go, I'm not going to break the system, am I?
I don't think so. No,
all right.
There you go.
See ya.
See ya. There we go. So I'm just leaving the room open if anybody wants to chat about any of that.
Greg, I just wanted to say thank you. Thanks so much for